Those Were the Days is filmed before a live internet audience.
Hello and welcome into Those Were the Days, the show where we talk about classic TV and we look at it through with nostalgic eyes. I am your host this week, Travis, and I am steering the TARDIS. But I can't do this alone. No. I need help. And with his 25-foot long scarf, it's Audie.
We've got a fine program tonight. Doctor Who. Doctor Who? Yes. So, who's the doctor? That's right. No, I'm asking you. And I'm telling you. Okay, so who is the doctor? Correct. What do you mean, correct? I'm asking you. Who is the doctor? And I'm telling you, that's correct. Who is the doctor? I don't know who. Why not? You just said his name. Whose name? Yes. Whose name is the doctor? Exactly. Exactly. Fine, I'm done with this Doctor whomever it is. Actually, it's just Doctor Who. I said I'm done.
Wandering in, playing his recorder, it's Steven.
Hey y'all, so I'm going to do some quick math, see if I can turn my house into a TARDIS. There's only a slight chance it completely destroys the planet. Don't worry about checking it. I mean, it's not likely that the planet implodes. Oh, who are those guys? They're doing all the math using an abacus and 3 slide rules. It was good enough for NASA once. Oh, snap. I think we missed a decimal point. How could this have happened? Maybe we should add some sort of check? Nah, we'll get it next time.
And wearing a decorative vegetable, it's Amy.
A lot of our modern technology owes its creation, at least in part, to old sci-fi shows with vast worlds and optimistic views of what technology could make possible. Smartphones, iPads, 3D printers, just a drop in the bucket. But I think we can all agree that the biggest contribution of old school sci-fi are the advancements in styrofoam rock technology.
Boy, you nailed that. So we are kicking off a month of talking about recasting characters in shows with a favorite of mine, classic Doctor Who. Doctor Who began on the it's a long-running BBC show. Began in 1963, 60 years ago. It will be celebrating its 60th anniversary this year with a big special. They did one 10 years ago for the 50th anniversary as well. It ran from 1963 to 1989 on BBC. Took a break. They canceled it at that point. There was a made-for-TV movie, a U.S. slash BBC made-for-TV movie in 1996. And then the show was revived in 2005 on the BBC and has been running ever since. And one of the hallmarks of the show is that the Doctor can regenerate, which is a plot device used to cycle in new actors for the Doctor. But it got started out of necessity. So the first Doctor, William Hartnell, had been on the show for 4 seasons. His health was fading. He wasn't doing so well. And they needed a way to keep the show going. So they devised this idea of regeneration. And they had the Doctor change his face, but keep the same character, and they could continue on the show. And so that was why I chose it for this week. What I'm curious about is, did any of you watch any of these classic Doctor Who's? I'm going to start with Steven.
No, Travis. I've never seen a bit of the Doctor. I'm aware of the Doctor's cultural, impact. I see it everywhere. Like we've talked about DragonCon a couple times in the pre-show, and I have been, and there are doctors everywhere. There's a TARDIS set up in the middle of a hotel, and I'm like, I know what that is. I have no actual reference to anything on the show. All I know for certain is that it can be a very emotional experience, as it's the only time I've ever seen my sister-in-law actually cry was when I came home early and she was finishing a season of Doctor Who, and it was apparently very sad. And I was like, wait a minute, what is wrong with you? Are those actual tears? Yes. Yes, they were. And I have never let her forget the fact that I've now seen her cry in real life.
Well, there you go then. Audie, how about you? Do you ever watch Doctor Who?
I did not. I tried to get on board with the relaunch
Okay.
long after it had started, like just, finally sat down and was like, okay, let me give this a shot. And it just didn't grab me. I still know about it. I mean, being a nerd in nerd circles, you can't not know people who are passionate about Doctor Who and will tell you why you're wrong for not liking it. Um, so it's something you can't escape, I don't think. And this was an interesting watch for sure.
Yeah. We'll get to that for certain. Amy, how about you? Did you ever watch Doctor Who?
This was my very first experience with Dr. Hoomst, and yeah, no, a lot of people assume that I'm in. I mean, because it's like Audie said, right? Like, yeah, they'll get you every time. They'll tell you that you are wrong for not enjoying it. And I'm very afraid of doing this episode right now.
It's definitely waiting on the emails to show up.
Yeah, finally we're gonna get some engagement, and it's not for the right reasons.
Oh, don't worry so much about that. But so I did watch some classic Doctor Who. In fact, in high school, we used footage from one of the Tom Baker Doctor Who serials in a video project I did for my sophomore year English class. We were doing a segment on Arthurian legend, and we had decided that we were going to make a video basically that took Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Doctor Who as canon in the Arthurian legend. And so we had I played King Arthur, and we had King Arthur fighting the Daleks in the forest behind my subdivision.
Nice.
So so that wasn't my first foray into Doctor Who, but we used that, and I watched a lot. Tom Baker being my favorite Doctor, who was the Doctor of this. We watched the serial called Logopolis, which was his final one, and there were definitely better serials I could have chosen, but I wanted to choose something that had a regeneration in it, as part of sort of what we were talking about this month. But there were definitely better choices in terms of Tom Baker, or Doctor Who in general, that we could have gone with. Even some that involved multiple iterations of the Doctor interacting, which is always hilarious and super fun when that does happen, because they tend to butt heads a lot. It's great. Like one of the running gags is a doctor, an older doctor will come into the newer doctor's TARDIS, and he'll look around and say, "Oh, you've changed things." I don't like it. Every time he always says that, no matter what they did, and it's a great running gag. But the show, like I say, ran from 63 to 89. But they had seasons, but then inside of those seasons, they would do 3 and 4 episode serial arcs. So instead of being 22 episodes and either sort of the Star Trek method of like, here's just episodes that happen, or your current day type of television where it's very serialized throughout the season, there would just be 4 episodes that would kind of string together a story. They'd play them for a week and then they'd move on to the next story. And they did that for most of the classic run. Since the reboot, it's all been episodic and like, here's a season of 13 episodes or whatever. But I kind of like how they did that with some of the classic Who, although this particular one was probably one of the weaker scripts that they had. And it kind of shows because it sort of drags on. I did find us a video that was the 4 episodes stitched together into 1 hour and a half long thing. That's why it was as long as it was. They were 25-minute episodes, so kind of your standard British half-hour BBC TV thing.
I
But
thought
that
this
would
was
go
a
over
whole
4
movie.
weeks.
Yeah, that now this makes a lot more sense because it's like, dang, this was like a big deal. It was an hour and a half TV movie, but now I get it. Thank you for that explanation. It's like, whoo, this is a big one.
And there are quite a few of those you can find online where somebody just took and they would lop off a little bit at the end and the beginning and stitch them together. And I kind of like that just because then you get one story, and you don't have to, even though by doing that you only get the amazing theme song of Doctor Who at the beginning and at the end instead of 8 times, which in terms of themes from television series, this is in my top 3 like ever. I love the song itself it's a killer. There's a great version of it actually from Glastonbury Music Festival. that was done by, I believe it was Orbital, did that at Glastonbury, and it's one of my favorite versions of the Doctor Who theme I've ever heard. So definitely look that up. But the show was sci-fi, but it's not hard sci-fi at all. It's very much we're just going to do whatever we feel like in the given time. The Doctor is a Time Lord, which is a race of people from a planet called Gallifrey, and he basically just flits around the universe in his TARDIS, which is a ship it stands for time and relative dimension in space. That way he can go to any point in time and space that he wants, whenever. But the problem, and it has a chameleon circuit, so it can look like whatever it wants. It can blend into its environment, except that the chameleon circuit's broken, so it just looks like a blue police telephone box from Great Britain.
We should point out that apparently Gallifrey also has chameleons, and they call them chameleons, which I always think is a great sci-fi trope. Is when it's like alien race, but they're using the name of something like the Capuchin circuits, and it's like you got Capuchin monkeys on your planet, and you call them that. That's wild.
So there's a thing built in that the time vortex inside of the TARDIS actually does translations for people.
Oh, okay, of course.
Because there was an episode in the revival where a character came out and they were in ancient Rome, and she couldn't figure out why everyone was speaking English in ancient Rome, and the Doctor's trying to explain to her that it's the time vortex the TARDIS translates for you, and then she tried to speak Latin, and all of the Romans looked at her like she had three heads because the translation messed everything up. He's like, don't do that. Stop doing that. So anytime like companions, because the Doctor always has a companion with him, and it started off actually the first iteration of the Doctor was played by William Hartnell, and his companion was his granddaughter. Because they hadn't figured out quite the character yet, so he wasn't who he became down the road. And he was just this curmudgeonly old man, and he did his stuff. And like if you can find some of the very early episodes of this show, they're very rough. It's low budget. They're all in black and white, but they are low budget. You think the styrofoam rocks looked bad in this?
I thought they were tremendous.
They,
There's some advanced styrofoam rock technology.
Yeah,
You could only
But
see a little bit of like the painter's tape.
the set work was
Holding them together.
was great.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So this particular series or serial had the Doctor has decided that he wants to fix the chameleon circuit on the TARDIS, because the TARDIS, there's something to do with entropy, and he just wants to fix that and kind of fix up the old girl. And so he decides that he is going to materialize the TARDIS around a blue police telephone box on Earth in order to get exact dimensions of it that he can then take to what is the planet Logopolis, and get a block transfer computation in order to fix the thing. Lots of techno babble, sci-fi babble in
I was
there.
gonna
yeah.
say, I had no idea what he was actually doing. You just explained it perfectly. I was like, oh, okay, that's what he was doing. Like I heard the words he said that you just said as well.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
I know he said them in sequence and stuff, but did not compute in my brain.
I come from a long background of really heavy sci-fi and fantasy, right? Like I am willing to Gom Jabbar, yeah, I'm in. Okay, fine, sure, great. I got that. No problem. Whatever you need. I had written an entire other intro in which I was going to launch into the lore behind Warhammer 40,000, beginning with the God Emperor being betrayed by his son Horus, and then end with so if you understood none of that and kind of wished that I would just stop talking, then you understand where I was during a lot of this. I at no point, I'm pretty good at putting together, right? Like I understand how these things work. I at no point knew what was going on ever at any point.
Yeah, same.
And
I
it
was
is-
completely
Other than
lost.
when they were changing the tire. And
Yeah.
the spare was flat also. I was like, I understand this scenario.
I love time travel and I've watched Primer, the weirdest time travel movie I've ever seen in my life, and I understood more of what they were talking about in Primer than I understood in the first 15 minutes of this Doctor Who show.
And again, I did you all a disservice with this serial in that it was the last one of Tom Baker.
Yeah.
And so he had been doing this was 1981. He started in 1974. Tom Baker was the longest running Doctor. He did 170, I want to say 173-ish episodes of the series in his time. So he'd been at this for a long time, and he kind of was really baked into that character. And it was definitely, that's something that the Doctor does. The Doctor's very fast talking, lots of techno babble. It ends up being just sort of a just go with it type of show, especially some of these older serials, because they weren't like, one of the doctors in an interview talked about how I think it was Peter Davison who came after this, said that some of the scripts were not great because they weren't sci-fi fans writing them. They were just TV writers that would put their name on anything. They would just like write something and they would go and shoot that. And the revival since 2005, it's still that, but it's still like kooky, and you can sometimes have a lot of trouble following what's going on. But they're actual sci-fi fans, and people that really want to be there writing it, so it's a little bit easier to follow. But there's a lot. The Doctor is a lot of manic energy that can be tough to
Yeah.
tough to rein in
Mhm.
sometimes. But what I have found in my personal experience with watching Doctor Who is there comes a point where you just sort of, you either never understand it, you just give up and you walk away from it, which is perfectly fine if it's not your thing, because Doctor Who is a weird show. It's also very British television.
which I generally love.
Mhm.
But
I prefer British television
if
overall.
if you don't just judge it by this set of 4 episodes of this one long episode, but what I have found is that when you become a fan of Doctor Who, something clicks and all of a sudden you're like, nope, I totally get it. Everything's fine now. Like, I don't, sure, great. He's in ancient, Rome doing this. And then the next week there's a dinosaur on a spaceship and we're fine with that. Like, we don't care. There's an actual episode titled Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. So
I'm tired of these mother effing dinosaurs on a mother effing spaceship.
So they started off with William Hartnell and his granddaughter, and they had all sorts of adventures. He eventually decided not to do it anymore, so they bake in this regeneration, and then it took them like 2 or 3 iterations before they kind of got down how it worked. Then there were budgetary changes in the third Doctor, who was played by John Pertwee. By the way, the father of actor Sean Pertwee, if you've seen you, and who you've definitely seen in some movies. But John Pertwee's run as the third Doctor, the budget got cut by quite a bit, so he didn't really have a TARDIS. He drove around in a car because he was stuck. He was exiled on Earth, was the storyline to cut down on the budget. So they kept him basically in London and in England for all the storylines. So he had this old car, and he drove around with that. And then it gained more popularity. Tom Baker comes along with his giant scarf. That thing, the scarf is literally like 20 feet long.
Yeah.
It goes down to his feet. Tom Baker is 6'4", and
cow.
he's got that scarf wrapped around his neck like 2 or 3 times, and it still extends all the way down to his feet. He had to have tripped on that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the show just kind of did its thing. So the Doctor, he's getting measurements of the TARDIS to take it to Logopolis, but the Master, who's another Time Lord and sort of his rival, figures out his plan and materializes his TARDIS before that and does things. He basically turns people into little dolls. That's his evil plan.
That was weird and creepy.
I had no idea what was
Are we in
going on.
Coraline? I don't know what's happening.
It was the weird, like, that guy's on a fence and something about materializing Tarzan and infinite loops and gravity wells. And I know that one kid is basically the audience surrogate who's just yelling, "What? Why? What are we? Huh?" And the Doctor's got no time for him. Like, why are you even on this bus? Like, what? Nobody likes you. Like, why? Get off.
So that was one of his companions. That was Adric, who was basically a stowaway. And you're right, he was very much an audience surrogate, just there to be like, what's going on, what's happening, and the Doctor to completely ignore him. And just like, because that's one of my, I did like the first time we meet the Doctor, he's pacing back and forth, and Adric comes in to talk to him. He's like, "What if I told you if I'm in this part of the ship to just leave me alone unless it's terribly important?" "It's not terribly important, is it?" "No, it couldn't be terribly important. You wouldn't, or we'd hear the cloister bell." And then immediately you hear bong. It's like, "What's that?" "The cloister bell. Now go away." And that all happens that fast.
I was happy to see. I did have to look it up. I was happy to see that Tom Baker did after his run play Sherlock Holmes because
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
was the energy, like that whole part. I was like, that's just Holmes and his violin, and he's gonna do
Yeah.
target practice over the fireplace, and
Yep.
then we're gonna go
Mhm.
solve a murder. That was the vibe I got. Like that part I understood.
Which
I understood that.
Yeah.
I think is partly why Tom Baker is my favorite Doctor, because I get a lot of
Sure.
Sherlock Holmes energy from him.
Mhm.
Plus, he's
Yeah.
got the height. And Tom Baker was a Doctor who
Doctor
was
Who, you
able
said the name of the show.
roll
You
credits.
said the thing.
He was able to do the thing that I think makes the Doctor work, which is to be goofy and silly and kind of aloof and you're not quite sure where he's coming from, but then he can flip on a dime and get very demonstrative. And like William Hartnell and Sean Pertwee or John Pertwee to a point, the first and third Doctors, if they got angry, it just felt like a disappointed grandfather. Like they were just like they were shaking their fist at people, and it never. But like Tom Baker could look threatening, and he could sound threatening. He's big, imposing. He's got that deep
Mhm.
voice, and then he would give you that goofy smile and do something crazy, and you're like, okay, well, so he's just a nutcase. You never quite knew what he was doing, which is partly what I liked about him. But so they get to this planet Logopolis, which is apparently the center of the universe. It's got something to do with computational mathematics that they do without computers, because the math that they do is too
Okay,
complex for
I
computers.
did like that part. No, it's because it's like it's almost like, observing something changes the results. It's like
Mhm.
that in that the math they're doing changes the very reality in which we exist. And so computer, like if you do the math, it changes how the computer works.
Yes.
So it
Yep.
won't be able to do the math. And that part I thought was great.
Oh, that is
Yeah. So the
good. I didn't pick
master,
up on that.
Yeah.
yeah, and the master basically wants control of that or something. His motivations are very. I just want to control
I'm
the
the bad
universe.
guy. I don't
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's taken the form
I
of
wanna own
somebody's.
math.
Yeah. Well, reality warping math though.
Yeah.
Um, and effectively things happen and they end up at a giant satellite dish on Earth where he's going to beam out his radio
Code.
broadcast effectively and code that will destroy all of the universe unless they submit to him, and the Doctor has to stop it. While all this is going on too, there's a mysterious figure all in white that just sort of hangs out in the background beckoning people to him, and they occasionally go over and talk to him from afar. We see it from afar, and we have no idea what that is at
I
all.
thought that was the
Oh.
master the whole time. I was super confused.
Mhm.
I was like,
And it
oh, that's
turns
the
out,
master.
yeah, that's a character called the Watcher, which again they were still trying to figure out this whole regeneration thing. So they were just like every regeneration was different. The second Doctor, when he regenerated, it was a forced regeneration by the Time Lord Council, basically as a punishment. So that's been canon at one point. And the thing with Doctor Who is whatever rules and things they have established at some point in the series, they'll just break them later.
Hmm.
Sure.
So
The plot
they just
demands
do
it.
whatever they want.
That's fine.
Mhm.
It's very much a plot demands it show. Initially, the Doctor Time Lords were only allowed to regenerate 12 times and
Mhm.
have 13 lives, but after the 13th Doctor, they were like, "Oh no, we can do another one." So
Yeah. Oh, that's just
they just
guidelines,
broke the
really.
rules and did it again.
It's
Um,
Mhm.
all about energy
They
or
just changed the
something.
math. It's fine. Don't
Yeah.
even
yeah,
worry about it.
They
We
just
just
slid their abacus
yeah.
beads around, and they're like, yeah, we're good now.
There you go. No
Fixed
problem.
it.
Yep.
I did think it was kind of cool to have the Logopolis, the Logopolians. I don't know how they pronounce that, but they did their math by sound.
The logarithms.
Mhm.
He fed the math into like to record it. He fed it into the thing with sound, and then that would record the figures that they could then spit out of a different computer in order to check them against the math that all of the abacus people were doing all throughout the planet.
It was
Yeah.
E7, not E9. And
Yeah.
then the next three numbers were wrong.
They
Why didn't
were.
no one check?
All right, redundancy checks. We do that all
Mhm.
day in computers. Like it's the cyclic CRC errors. Ever heard of that? That means something didn't math right when it went through the second time, and we've made a mistake.
This was written by people whose first computers used punch cards. So
Yeah,
You
they
vacuum
didn't
check your
have
tubes.
punch
that.
cards.
Yeah, you check them. You run it through twice.
this was 1981,
Yeah.
so and again, it's science fiction. It's basically fantasy with a veneer of glowy lights and technology.
Did you see the
So
Monitor's shoes, by the way? His robe blew sideways at one point. He's wearing some tighty tights and some 6-inch stilettos. I was impressed. I was
oh
like,
yeah,
that man's
Mhm.
running in those shoes? That's incredible.
yes.
I pay attention to
Um,
shoes. It's a thing. Don't worry about it.
yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And the Doctor always has great shoes. David Tennant
Hmm.
being my favorite because he wore
Yeah,
Converse.
he wore Chucks. So I mean, he wins.
One of my favorite interactions between two doctors is from the Day of the Doctor, which was the 50th anniversary special, where Matt Smith meets David Tennant's doctor for the first time, and he makes fun of his shoes. He's like, "And you're out here in sand shoes," is what he calls them. Oh, but it was really really funny. I just it's hard to describe. Like I've given you the entirety of the plot of this episode,
Hmm.
and none of it makes any sense, and that
Mm-mm.
really doesn't matter in the end. But what was the important part of this episode was that in order for the Doctor to stop the Master, he had to unplug that satellite dish
You
while
know
the
how
Master was.
satellite dishes are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
big
that's how they
old
Mhm.
work.
plug. You could just yank it.
Well, that was what was feeding the code into it.
Mm.
So he had to unplug that. Meanwhile, the Master is moving the satellite dish, thus negating anything he's trying to do, but also knocking the Doctor off of it. Um, and the Doctor falls to his death. And that's how, like, basically regeneration is when a Time Lord is near death, their cells regenerate, but it changes the way that they look. And so we get that moment. Tom Baker's Doctor falls. Everyone runs up to make sure he's okay, and he lays there and he goes, "Well, this is it. This is the end." But the moment's been prepared for, and he points back, and that creepy dude in all white with the white face is just standing back there, and they're like, "Wait, but he was the Doctor the whole time." And it's like, "Sure, yeah, all right, fine.
Okay.
We'll just go with that."
Okay.
Yeah.
And they
I,
like merge, and there's a flashing light, and then suddenly he's got a different face.
I
And there you
watched
go.
that
That's
scene twice,
I did
Travis.
I
I
did like the
rewound
hard
it.
cut at the end.
Oh yeah,
The
that
hard
was
cut at the end, very effective because you're
really
like, oh,
mic drop.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I rewound it because I was like, rewound, listen to me. Those were the days.
Yeah.
I rewound it because I was like, wait, what does that mean? He was the Doctor the whole time. I've been watching the show and I don't even know what's going on. And then he just turns green or whatever and floats into Doctor Who's face. And I'm like, what the? Okay. Okay.
Okay.
We'll
Sure.
take it. So you said Monty
Alright.
Python or something earlier, and it made me while I was watching this, I was like, this show reminds me a lot of Monty Python without the jokes. It's like just as hokey and silly, but it's not aiming for that. It's or aiming for funniness like Monty Python was, but it's still very British. And I'm like, I
It
gotta
is.
wrap my head
Mhm.
around this.
It is, and there's definitely episodes that have a lot of humor. Tom Baker, in particular, I love some of his humor because of that manic energy that he has and sort of the way that he speaks. There was a great episode, um, part of a serial called, I think it was the City of, I want to call it City of Death, but they're at this rich guy's house, played by Julian Glover, who's an actor you've seen in things as well. He was Walter Donovan in Last Crusade, and they're Tom Baker's doctor is getting walked into the room by the butler, and the butler like shoves him, and he falls behind a couch. And it's one of those moments that he comes up from behind. He's like, "What a lovely butler! He's so violent." Like those kinds of jokes are just great. Or like, "You're a beautiful woman," probably. Because he doesn't quite get humans either. Like he doesn't dislike them, but he doesn't quite get them. So, and he would always offer people jelly babies, jelly beans. Like he was always offering candy, stuff like that. But it, it's a zany show. Don't let this be because this was when I was watching this. What I noticed was that it was a very plodding story, and this felt like it was 2 episodes worth of story that they had to stretch out to 4. And there are other serials in that they did a much better job of having like enough plot to kind of move things along.
I just
But
want to know if the stewardess got back to Heathrow and got her job.
nope,
Man,
nope. She ends up being she becomes the companion of the Fifth Doctor for a couple of years.
She just was obsessed with her job more than anybody I've ever known. Everything was
I mean,
airplanes or I gotta get there.
that was a good gig in 1981.
Oh, It it
I'm sure it
was.
was.
Absolutely. She actually came back just recently on an episode of Doctor Who. That actress playing that character in a current day episode of the series. They've been doing a lot more of that lately. They will occasionally bring old characters back. There was a long running companion of the Doctor named Sarah Jane Smith, who actually got a spin off show called the Sarah Jane Chronicles back in the Tom Baker era, I believe. But she came back in the redone version with David Tennant for a few episodes, which I thought was kind of fun because the companions were always a big part of it. The Doctor is the main character of the series, but he's not a human, and so they always wanted to have some kind of a human companion or somebody to be like Adric, the audience surrogate.
Mhm.
And they cycled through many companions. They would come and go. They would be, and oftentimes they would sort of accidentally get involved, like Tegan in this, who just wanders in the police box because she thinks that there's a phone in there for some reason. Like she doesn't realize that the phone's on the outside. I guess I'm not sure, but she gets curious, wanders in, and gets stuck inside the TARDIS, and honestly takes that really well.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
does. I mean, she's Australian,
That's
so
true.
Sure.
Yeah.
arguably not the weirdest thing that she's ever had to deal
They have
with.
spiders this big. She's just like,
Yeah,
whatever.
she's
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's fine.
This is probably okay.
And
It
then
always
she immediately wants to speak to the manager, and I love her for that because at this point I was with her.
It's such a
I
great
do
trope
feel
when you just need something to happen, so you just have the character be completely okay with it. Like there's no
Yeah.
normal human response. It's like, no, we need this to be okay because we need the story to go forward. Enough of
Yeah.
this.
That
No
tire
freaking out.
was a magical level of flat.
Oh my
I
It
was
gosh.
really was.
honestly
Yeah, it
impressed. It
was.
was real good.
If she had to roll that thing all the way to the garage or wherever she's rolling it, her back would be just in. I mean, she'd
Wrecked.
never stand straight up again. I was
No,
like, you can't roll a tire like. Plus, it
kick
looks
it
like it
or
weighs
something.
8
I don't
pounds.
know.
Just pick it up. Like it's a
That's what I was
bicycle
thinking. I was
tire.
like,
What are you doing?
Really, I mean, that car, they could probably just walk the car.
You
That's
pick
true.
up one end, I'll pick
My
up the
dad
other.
tells the story. My dad had an MG midget, and they did drive it into a ditch once, and so they did just have to like get out and pick it up and put it back on the road.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
about
That
right
was
with
how
those
this car
cars.
felt. It was just
say,
pick
I
it
love
back
how they
up.
tried
It's fine.
to get the spare out and then tried to pump up the spare with a little foot pump.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
that's not
I
happening. You're gonna be at
appreciated
that for a year.
their girl power energy. They were like,
yes.
the aunt was like, well,
Well,
maybe a
Tegan's
knight
girl power
errant will
energy
come.
anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, we could get a knight errant. And she's like, there are no knights anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, I love you so much.
I
This
did
is
feel
the
bad though
80s.
that her aunt gets turned into a doll by the master, and then just
Yeah.
that's it.
And that we find out later that that's just killing somebody. Like
Mhm.
the doctor just casually mentions, yeah, he killed him. It's like, wait, what? Like, yeah, that's not reversible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Doll
they're dead
equals
now.
death. It's like,
Now it's
oh,
being sold as a
okay.
haunted doll. on
Why?
My brother,
Okay.
my brother.
But also, why would the police be so suspicious of a doll in the back seat of an abandoned vehicle? Like, it's not like they know that the aunt was killed. They just found a weird doll in the back of the car, and all of a sudden they're harassing the doctor. Like, you got to come to the station. How do you know? What do you? What? Nobody. There's no crime here. Nothing. We don't know where that doll came from.
Well, they're
I-
trying to figure
man.
out if it's not his car, how did he end up there? And why?
Well,
are the
who
dolls there?
cares?
And where's the owner of the car then?
He's just a transient. Don't worry
Clearly
about it.
trying to get another tire.
Yeah, like, you
Yeah,
got
listen.
you. Where did you come from? I've been here for hours. What is the deal?
And in this serial, we do see the inside of the TARDIS a little bit. But one of the great things of the show is the TARDIS, because it is that blue police phone box, and it's bigger on the inside. And you walk in, and they would have extensive sets of that. And as the show went on, they got even more and more ridiculous. But I always loved the TARDIS, and it makes that great sound, which later on got a really funny joke about it, where it didn't do that once, and the doctor's like, "Wait, where's the sound? Why didn't it do that?" And someone says, "Yeah, you've been driving it with the parking brake on." I just thought
Lord.
that was such a
Oh,
that
that's
was
good.
so good.
That's wonderful.
But I mean, like I said, that's kind of what Doctor Who is. Like this is a weaker serial, but that's basically what Doctor Who is. Weird zany things happen, usually involving time and the destruction of the universe or some sort of a war, and the Doctor technobabbles his way out of it. Whether you like that or not is kind of up to you, but I am curious. Having seen this, would you be interested in watching any more Doctor Who, starting with you, Amy, since you're the one that everyone assumes would be a big fan?
I would, as long as no one wants to talk to me about it. Like, like I could very quietly maybe watch some Doctor Who, but I don't want to live the lifestyle. I can't follow them there.
The
They're like
thing,
anime fans. I cannot follow you there. I can appreciate your culture, but I cannot go there.
This
I
is the
have too much already. Do you know how much of my brain power is devoted to the enemies of the God Emperor of mankind? It's like a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, you
and
guys.
that's
Guys,
the
the
thing.
great
Like,
game, it's the Chaos Gods and they're fighting each other. This is where I'm at. I can't do. I
and
can't.
that's like anime fans, Whovians, Doctor Who fans, Warhammer fans. Those are like fandoms that you when you get into them and you get into them hard, it takes up a lot of brain cycles. It really does because it's deep. There's a lot of lore. There's a 60 years worth of Doctor Who stories have been told.
Yeah.
Because even when it went off the air, they were doing books and they were doing radio plays. There were a lot of radio stuff
See,
and
see,
audiobooks.
that I think I could get into. I
Mhm.
like a good old radio play.
Yeah, radio plays and audiobooks. There were
Mhm.
quite a few of them. In fact, the Eighth Doctor, who was in the movie, um, which is diminishing returns on whether or not you like that movie, but the actor Paul McGann ended up doing a lot of uh, audiobooks for Big Finish audio as the Doctor. So, um, all right, I respect that, Amy. I would say it's worth watching a little bit more than, especially if this is the only Doctor Who you've ever watched. Check out some of the revival from
Sure.
2005 on, because it is a little bit more. It's a little closer to kind of current television storytelling,
Yeah.
which does make it a little bit easier to follow. The
My
budget's slightly higher,
yeah.
which does help as well.
My deep love of David Tennant might be enough.
Yeah, I mean those are really good. Eccleston, all of the Doctors that I have watched in the revival have been great. Eccleston is there for the first season, but then David Tennant came along and he's just a delight because he does the same thing that Tom Baker could do, which is he can go dark
Oh
on
yeah.
people,
Mhm.
and it's scary, but then he'll also just be really goofy. Like one of the first things he says, he goes to talk, and he's like, "New teeth."
That's good.
So, Stephen, how about you? Would you give Doctor Who another shot? Maybe watch something else, either newer or classic. Just keep in mind
Yeah.
that like what we watched is a very weak representation, especially of the classic ones.
No,
In
I
my opinion.
understand that. Much like Amy, I only have so much room in my geek brain, and I will happily discuss all the nuances of the living force and why Qui-Gon Jinn is the best Jedi ever. I will do that with you. But I can't. I don't know that I'm gonna be able to get on board with the Doctor Who, and it's not. So my brain is a strange place, and one of the things it's not good with, and this episode almost got me. Those tones they play constantly in the background. I don't know what it is, but something about my inner ear hates it. And like I get physically ill when I listen to it. So I had to like kind of like volume down up. I had to find a sweet spot where I'm like, I'm gonna be sick listening to these
Whatever the
tones.
opposite of ASMR is.
Yeah. Like I've got ASMR, so I don't know if it plays with it. But then I have like tried to watch modern episodes of Doctor Who, and it has that soap opera effect going on. And it's like the same thing. Like the images are very smooth. I don't know if it's because frame rates in Europe, all that stuff. But I'm like, I can't watch this either. I would be nauseous the way they're moving the camera. So no, Travis, I can't watch it. But it's because I get physically ill from sitting in front of it. So I think I'm good. I'm good. This was a
All
great
right, all right.
experience.
I'll have to see if I can find something that isn't frame rated weird or has the cloister bell going on
Yeah,
that
it
maybe you
was.
could watch.
I was like, oh boy.
Well, Audie, you've watched a little bit, you said, but what about you? Would you be up for watching more Doctor Who?
Maybe I think I'm just gonna sit comfortably where I'm at now, where I'll watch, this episode because we're watching it. I'll watch another episode if somebody's really like, "Hey, we need to watch this, talk about it."
Mhm.
But I think I'm more comfortable with Doctor Who specifically being one of those shows where I watch a clip of something and then I go read the Wikipedia to see where all that stuff comes together and just be okay with that. Like I don't feel the need because it's one of those things where like it's been around for 60 years. There's a whole lot of crap to watch.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel like I need to go watch all that to get everything. So
So one of the beauties of Doctor Who is that you don't, because like I said, whatever's happened before may get referenced, and if it sails over your head, that's fine. But at the same time, whatever's happened before, they largely ignore and do their own thing anyway, and
sure,
so you
but
can kind of do that.
I'm the kind of nerd that wants to know all the freaking lore
Yeah.
and where this came from
Oh, I
and where
get it.
that came from, So, um, yeah, I'm okay where I'm at, just experiencing Doctor Who here and there in my own little way. Um, and I have nothing against it at all. It's just, yeah, I don't think it's quite my thing, and so I'll just experience it in the drips and drabs that I'll take it and
I
see how
will.
many different actors that I didn't realize were connected to Doctor Who are connected to
Oh
Doctor Who.
boy, there's a lot of
Lots.
them too. Lots,
Mhm.
especially as you get into the revival in 2005 and on. There
Right.
is there is a bottle episode that ended up getting expanded on, like one of the characters in it later, but it's a self-contained episode from David Tennant's run that I will find and link to you guys. It's called Blink, and
Mm,
it is a
I am familiar.
yeah.
really good bottle episode of Doctor Who.
That one, I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone even tangentially related to the geek space that doesn't know Blink. Everybody knows Blink.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's such a good episode. There was also a really good one where with David Tennant again, and it's got one of my favorite. It's technically not an outtake because it was in the episode, but the audio was muted for part of it, and it's just David Tennant. He's supposed to be doing random talking in the background of a scene, and then the audio kind of comes up at the end of it, and it's. I will find the clip of that and send it to you guys because that is worth watching.
All right.
It's just David. It's a masterclass of David Tennant, who
Don't let
is
him
my
have his
second
accent,
favorite
though,
Doctor.
right?
He only got it like twice, um, which is unfortunate that he didn't get his natural Scottish
Heartbreaking.
accent more.
I really hate this trend of just having actors with great accents not have their accents. Like, I think one of the best things about Chernobyl when that show came out was everybody just talked how they talk, whatever. And it was the
Mhm.
greatest. Like, why do they have to be either this or that? Why can't they just bring their Nate? Like, let the Scottish people be Scottish unless they're from Glasgow, and then dial it back a little bit.
Titles. It's fine.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
subtitles.
Yeah.
I will say I agree. I want actors to use a natural accent unless they're good at doing the accent that they're
And it's
asked to do,
And
and
it's
it's
important. It
important to the
matters.
character.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch doing an American accent
Sure.
that's Stephen Strange works because he's
Yes.
good at that. Hugh
Mhm.
Laurie doing
Hugh
House
Laurie
and doing an
is
American accent. Hugh Laurie's great with that.
So good. Yeah.
Colin Farrell is really good at an American
Mhm.
accent too. In fact, like Colin Farrell and Christian Bale were ones that I didn't realize until I'd seen them in like two or three things. Oh, he's Irish. Oh, that guy's
Oh
Welsh
yeah.
Yeah.
because they were so.
a
Christian Bale also.
whiplash when you hear them and you're like, what is happening?
It took me until I
Again.
saw Reign of Fire before I knew Christian Bale wasn't American because he
Mhm.
would do all of his press tours with an American accent.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was
Weirdo.
dedicated
Again,
to it.
watch Band of Brothers and you realize like 3/4 of that cast is some sort
Oh
of
yeah.
European and has an accent, and you're like, what?
Yeah. When is this?
And I don't know if it was the show's idea for Tennant to not have a Scottish accent or if it was his idea to go with a more estuary accent that he did. But he was good either way, so I don't
Yeah.
really it doesn't bother me.
He's
But I
redeemed by
do
being
love
Scrooge McDuck.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's
He
true.
gets to go all Scottish there.
Complete redemption. It's fantastic.
But That is Doctor Who, and this is sort of a granddaddy of sort of recasting a role, where they literally built it into the character that they could recast this role and keep the show going, and keep it fresh every few years too, which is a lot of fun. But we're going to talk about other recastings that have happened in classic television this month, and it's kind of fun to think about that, because this was a born out of necessity, and they each iteration would have their own personality, but that's not always the case when you recast a character. And Audie, you've got next week, and what are we watching?
For next week, we're gonna go to a good old show called Roseanne.
Oh yeah.
So, about the 6th season, they recast one of the children, Becky. So, we're going to talk about that. So, we're watching season 6, episode 9, Homecoming, when we have the new Becky. And I picked this one because I remember this one specifically growing up. Like, I remember Becky being recast. And then there's a special Easter egg at the end of the episode that I want to make sure everybody watches, because it's worth it. And we'll talk about it next week.
Okay.
But it's one of the reasons I love this particular recasting.
All right. Yeah, I definitely remember that recasting, because we watched Roseanne a lot growing up, and I was like, wait, that's not Becky. What the hell is going on here? And
It's before you could
Then I
read about
became-
the recasting on the internet like 6 months before it happened.
Right.
You would just sit
Right.
down to watch TV and you're like, what? That's
You just
different.
hope they talked about it in a TV guide.
Yes.
yeah, I almost chose Roseanne. I almost chose Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was another one. But
Mhm.
when it came down to it, I had a chance to talk Doctor Who and expose you all to Tom Baker, and I was going to take it. Damn it! So
Consider us exposed.
Yeah.
now it's time to cover up. But that has been Doctor Who, and those were the days for this week. I definitely had fun going back and watching, and then watching a bunch of just like random Doctor Who stuff. But I will send you a couple of these things. I think they're worth it, and I'm looking forward to watching Roseanne for next week. That is
Yeah.
on Where's that available on Peacock?
It is on Peacock. It's on, you got to have premium, but it's like $5 for a month. So,
Okay,
um,
they might even have a free trial. I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So watch Roseanne and then watch all of The Office over again, and you'll be fine.
Mhm.
There you go. Get your
While
get your
you're
money.
there.
Yep.
Sensuous. Go ahead and watch that.
All
If
right,
you haven't
that'll
watched
be next
Yellowstone, apparently everybody else is watching that. You can watch
Yeah.
that.
If you're a man of a certain age, Yellowstone is going to be your jam.
Well, that removes at least 1/4 of our panel here. So I think we're-
No, I don't know. Last time I got my teeth cleaned, my dental hygienist was very into Yellowstone,
Okay.
and she told me all about it,
All right.
and I
Mm.
could not stop her.
No, you can't, because you are a captive audience. She has been waiting for somebody to talk about this with.
Yeah.
I've watched some bits and pieces. It's basically the modern day Dallas.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
That's the
Alright.
best way I could describe it. So, for all that Dallas did, Yellowstone is our Dallas, this
Basically
generation's
Dallas.
Dallas.
All right.
So, all right. Well, I can skip it then. I didn't care about Dallas back then.
Yeah.
Who shot JR? All right.
I mean, look, when I think of Patrick
Who's
Duffy,
Maggie
Dallas
Simpson?
is not the first thing that comes to mind.
Step by step. It's the first
That's
thing
right.
that comes to mind.
Mhm.
That is
Day by day.
That is my Patrick Duffy.
Mm-hmm. Foreshadowing. We'll get there one day.
Well, I want to thank everybody in our chat room for being here this week. Faye Lynch stopped by, and I know Faye is a Doctor Who fan. We've talked
Mhm.
extensively about that. And I want to thank the three of you for putting up with the silly, low-budget sci-fi that I made you watch.
Thank you, Travis.
I will say I did like that instead of doing the Star Trek method of putting a forehead appliance on them, instead the appliance to make them look alien was on the back of the head,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is different.
Yes, it is.
And
Mhm.
6-inch stiletto heels that he ran around in. So good,
Yeah.
good on that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, until next week and until we watch Roseanne. So be ready for that and the recasting of Becky. For Amy, for Stephen, for Audie, I am Travis saying good night.